This is a weekly summary of interesting news that is relevant for my lectures at the Eastern Switzerland University of Applied Sciences. My name is Thomas Bocek, and today we will discuss 5 topics. The first topic is again about self-hosting, and this is the following article here: become unbannable from your email Gmail. And this article discusses a practical system for controlling your own email infrastructure. The author argues that email has become more important than our physical address because losing access to your email means losing access to all your online accounts, which requires contacting customer service for each service individually. And the author presents a first step: get your own domain instead of using free email providers where you have no control. Register your own domain and use a provider like Google Workspaces or Proton that lets you attach your custom domain to your email service. This separation of ownership from infrastructure means you can switch providers by changing DNS records without losing your email address. The domain becomes your stable identifier while the underlying service provider change. And I think this is a solid advice. Then the author argues in a second step to take full control over the emails by configuring your email provider to automatically forward all incoming messages to this local backup server. So the article promises full control over our emails, but then it talks about automated backups to a local server. That's not full control, that's redundancy with extra steps. Real control means running your own mail server and handling all the infrastructure yourself, which we covered last week. And this setup still depends entirely on Google or Proton for sending and receiving. You're just copying their data after they received your email. The author admits self-hosting is out of the question due to technical complexity, I believe, then somehow claims this workaround gives you full control. Well, it doesn't. It gives you a backup strategy and for sure easier provider switching. So step 1, spot on. Step 2, not so much. The next article, again, about self-hosting. It's the following article here. This article discusses self-hosting personal services as an alternative to centralized cloud platforms. The author argues that privacy and digital sovereignty motivate moving away from big tech companies that collect and monetize user data. Self-hosting means running your own data servers to control where your data lives and who can access it. Calendar data reveals your identity, contacts, your work patterns, health appointments, sleep routines, and political activities. Contact lists expose your social network. Location tracking by services like Google Maps create detailed movement histories without explicit user consent. Most users do not realize companies like Google, Apple, and Samsung store and process this information. I already mentioned I also self-host. I'm self-hosting many services, but for me, it's not the privacy aspect that matters for me. It's the technical challenge I enjoy. And as a side note, so here on the image, the author seems to have quite so many devices of Beelink. Beelink is a mini PC manufacturer from China. And I also recently bought a mini PC also from Beelink. It's the following here, the Beelink GTR 9 Pro. Here, this is how it looks like. And the problem is, this is also the downside of self-hosting. You have to deal with hardware issues. Currently, I'm not sure if I should send back the device, as the 10 gigabit network interfaces makes the machine run unstable and it crashes. It doesn't matter if it's Linux, Windows, it crashes. And this is a firmware, or it seems to be a firmware issue. Beelink and Intel have acknowledged the problem, and also several YouTubers mentioned that. So this one is one YouTuber that recently mentioned it. He also has here the key lessons. And after that, he's talking about this issue.
Networking. Now, the Intel E610 that came in here is a newer NIC from Intel. And overall, that's great, and it's a much higher end solution than something like a Realtek NIC. So in terms of performance, a newer NIC is always good, and that's what we want. On the other hand, there are some teething issues and some challenges with this. One of the big challenges with this solution is that the firmware on the NIC, the BIOS and all that kind of stuff with the new drivers, we ran into issues. When we initially started up the system, the NICs worked absolutely fine.
And I also ran into issues, I have to say. So I cannot use it. I have bought it, and since 2 weeks, I'm trying to figure out what the solution to this could be. So there are configurations where you can completely disable the networking interface, rely on external USB networking or a USB adapter for networking or Wi-Fi. And this is, as I mentioned, the downside of self-hosting. You are responsible for your own hardware. If the hardware is not running, you're responsible. You cannot blame anybody else. Well, I can blame Beelink or Intel, but still it doesn't run. For me at home, this is okay. It's kind of tinkering with tech. So for me, no problem. But for others who need a reliable system, probably a service, a hosted service makes more sense. The author here emphasizes using open protocols like SMTP and IMAP instead of company-specific interfaces. For implementations, this article recommends specific tools. Calendar and contacts use CalDAV and CardDAV servers like Baikal. Email requires careful setup and clean IP addresses with proper DNS configuration, though tools like Stalwart and MailCow simplify that. Home automation through Home Assistant prevents dependence on companies that shut down services or force account creation, and the author refuses to create online accounts for locally used appliances. Location tracking uses self-hosted alternatives like Davarich with mobile apps like OwnTrack. For me, CalDAV and CardDAV, I use Nextcloud. For GenAI, he didn't mention that, but there I'm using llama.cpp, and I'm not using Home Assistant yet or location tracking. And of course, for my reverse proxy, I use Caddy, and everything so far runs, except for this machine that I have now here sitting on my desk and not being able to run properly. The next article is about Bluesky. We mentioned Bluesky the last time. It's the following article here, and this article examines Bluesky. It's a social network that claims to be decentralized. We talked about this the last time, but they reveal serious gaps between its promises and reality, according to this article. Bluesky launched in 2023 as an alternative to Twitter using a protocol called @proto that splits the social network into multiple components. Personal data servers that store user posts, Relay servers that aggregate data into a central feed, labelers that categorize content, and application servers that display everything to users. The architecture is more complex than competing protocols like ActivityPub, which powers Mastodon. @proto's main advantage is allowing users to move between servers while keeping their followers and post history. However, this complexity creates problems. After 2 years, Bluesky remains the only fully functional implementation of its own protocol. Alternative networks attempts to use AdProto cannot operate independently at the moment. And there's an example, it's Black Sky. It's an alternative service created in 2023, specifically to escape Blue Sky's moderation policies. And despite running its own data servers and relay infrastructure, Black Sky still depends on Blue Sky's application server for performance and its moderation system for functionality. And when Blue Sky banned a user named Link from their platform, he simultaneously lost access to his posts on Black Sky, even though Black Sky administrators never banned him. And his data existed in the distributed system, but became invisible because the centralized application layer blocked it. And this demonstrates a fundamental problem. Blue Sky built a distributed data storage layer, but kept centralized control over the application layer. The moderation software needed for independent operation is too difficult to deploy, forcing alternatives to rely on Blue Sky's infrastructure. Without functional alternatives, the system is decentralized in theory, but centralized in practice. And user can store data on different servers, but Blue Sky controls whether anyone can actually see it. A similar pattern emerged with NFTs and OpenSea. When OpenSea delisted stolen or problematic NFTs, digital assets still existed on the blockchain, but became effectively invisible to most users who accessed NFTs through OpenSea's platform. The NFTs remained technically decentralized on the blockchain, but OpenSea's dominance on the primary marketplace meant that delisting functioned as a practical ban. Users could theoretically view and trade these NFTs through other marketplaces or direct blockchain interaction, but in practice, most people only used OpenSea. The decentralized infrastructure existed, but centralized access points controlled what users actually saw and could interact with. The next article is about how AI coding assistants have fundamentally changed what developers consider worth building. It's the following article here. So here the author created a command line script that checks USB cables quality by parsing system data on macOS. Nothing fancy, and the tool identifies whether cable supports fast charging and data transfer or are low quality connections. That's a reasonable tool. The author initially built this using Bash with AI assistants, but found it difficult to maintain. Even simple changes like adjusting output colors became complicated because AI generated the code without clear structure. The second attempt, he used Golang, chosen for better readability and the ability to compile cross-platform binaries. And this rewrite took only 10 minutes. And the key point is about changing the development economics. 2 years ago, before capable AI assistants, the author would not have built the script at all. The friction was too high relative to the value. Learning the necessary APIs, handling edge cases, and debugging would have taken hours for this simple utility. Now, these small scripts are almost free to build. And this changes the calculation of what deserves developer time. Tasks previously dismissed as not worth the effort becomes viable when implementation time drops from hours to minutes. The author notes achieving 5 times speed up compared to manual coding, even after reviewing and modifying AI output. The barrier to creating custom tools has dropped dramatically. The real story is not the technical detail about parsing USB data, it's how AI assistants lowers the threshold for automation. Developers can now build specialized utilities for narrow use cases that would have been economically irrational before. When building takes 10 minutes instead of several hours, the cost benefit for small automation projects completely changes. And I also observed this while I started QOTP, which is the following here, QOTP. This is a minimalistic UDP-based transport protocol. It's kind of similar to QUIC. It's an opinionated QUIC, but focused on simplicity and reasonable defaults. And the idea was to test how good large language models help me with this task. And I also have other projects like, for example, PreveltKit, where I did some releases today. I also talked about PreveltKit in one of my last in the news sections. And this is static first Svelte framework that generates pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript output with lightning fast build times. But I also build smaller tools since I also self-host, and Nextcloud is used for syncing everything except the dot files. I have a small tool to create soft links and copy the config as a non.config file into a separate folder that gets synced. The tool itself is not difficult, but there are many corner cases that needs to be dealt with. And before I did this, I did them symlinks manually. And now with GenAI, I have a tool for that. Also, I use quite so many PCs. I typically switch between 4 or 5 PCs. And with Nextcloud, this works like a charm. But browser bookmarks are difficult to synchronize. There are built-in services for various browsers, but the problem I had is that this would require another self-hosted service. And since I already used Nextcloud, I wanted something file-based, or at least something with WebDAV. And since I didn't find anything, I wipe coded a browser extension. And before that, I would have needed at least a couple of days to finish that, to read into what's the structure of such a browser extension and how even to start. And now with LLMs, this is just a matter of hours. And also this blog here, very interesting. This blog mentions an interesting term. The author proposes vibe engineering as a term for experienced developers who use AI coding assistants productively while remaining accountable for their code, distinguishing it from vibe coding, which describes careless, prompt-driven development with no understanding of how the code works. He argues that effective AI assistant development actually requires senior engineering skills like automated testing, documentation, code reviews, and project planning, because AI tools amplify existing expertise rather than replace it. The term intentionally combines contradictory concepts to highlight that professional AI assistant development is a sophisticated practice and not just casual prompt hacking. So I really like this vibe engineering. So with my projects, I would consider this vibe engineering and not vibe coding in that sense. And another good article also published quite recently, a couple of days ago. Here, another good example, the author documents building a macOS update notification feature for Ghost TTY, which is the following application here. So this is Ghost TTY. I'm also using it. I think it's quite useful. And AI coding assistant, he used 16 sessions, which costed him in the end $16 US, and he let the AI work for 8 hours while he was working on it for 3 days. And he emphasized that effective AI assistant development requires domain expertise, manual cleanups between sessions, and thorough code reviews, with AI serving as an assistant for generating scaffolding, exploring options, and handling tedious polish rather than replacing engineering judgment. So also here, human input is quite essential. And the last article, this is about the roller coaster in the crypto market that happened over the weekend. It's the following article here. A crypto trader recently earned 192 million from a Bitcoin short position just 30 minutes before a major Trump tariff announcement with respect to China, sparking immediate accusation of insider trading. And the trade's timing occurring minutes before the news broke, led analysts to accuse the trader of exploiting non-public information, with one noting they played a huge role in triggering a market-wide liquidation cascade that wiped out over 250 wallets. This controversy followed the same trader reopening a 163 million Bitcoin short on Hyperliquid, raising fresh questions about market integrity in decentralized platforms where such large timed trades occur without oversight. The incident highlights issues around unregulated leverage and market manipulation lists. While Binance denied technical faults during the volatility, it later provided $283 million in compensation to affected users. And the event has intensified debates about transparency and accountability in crypto markets, providing how easily leveraged position on decentralized exchanges can amplify systematic risks when tied to major news event. An ongoing investigation has linked this cryptocurrency whale controlling over 100,000 Bitcoins on Hyperliquid to the former CEO of Bitforex, which collapsed due to fraud allegations. And researchers traced the whale's main wallet, his verified X account, via his ENS name, matching transaction patterns from Bitforex related addresses and Binance deposits used for large trades. Bitforex shut down in 2024 after losing $57 million and facing fraud charges in China. The connection sparked debate about transparency in decentralized systems, with one analyst calling the evidence too convenient and questioning if the link was intentional. While investigators note the whale's transaction online, skepticism remains about whether such on-chain tracing reliably proves involvement in market manipulation. In this case, highlights how blockchain analysis can uncover potential fraud links, but also demonstrates the challenges in verifying identities and intent in unregulated trading environments. This isn't just a case of one trader profiting. I think it's a blueprint for future systematic fraud. This may expose a market where profitable manipulation is incentivized and unpunished. So these exploits won't fade away. I think they will escalate. And the next whale may not just profit from insider timing, they could try to engineer chaos to profiting from shorting cryptocurrencies.